About 2 months ago, my 3-year-old son started having dreams about visitors during the night. A few months before that, he went to the doctors and received the dreaded flu shot, so I passed it off as junior PTSD from that. He talked about a man coming through his wall and giving him a shot with a glowing needle on the left side of his head, which could be, I guess, a normal dream for a toddler with an imagination. But the only TV he watches is kid Netflix, and never more than an hour a day under direct supervision. The dreams went on. He would get up around the same time, 2:30 to 3 a.m. almost every night, come into my room to sleep in my bed with me, and I would calm him down before bringing him back to his room. He would go on about the dream as I calmed him, describing a typical monster. Black eyes and hair, long fingers, large head. A few days he was obsessed with drawing pictures of what he called the doctor that visited him, which just looked like a poorly drawn face. It was only when we went to the library when it came up again. He pointed out a book cover of an extraterrestrial, claiming that was what was visiting him. I'm skeptical. He must have seen this on TV. But when I finally start to ask him about it, he explains what happens. And this is what I got out of it. Keep in mind, he's 3 years old. Man comes through wall. Sometimes it's a thing with a big white head with short black hair, big black eyes, and a white suit. Sometimes it's 2 small blue men in blue suits. They put glowing needle in or around his left ear. He says it's for bugs, and it makes him feel sick and hurts a little bit. He then goes into outer space and talks to them, and gets to play with other kids. Another thing that caught me off guard is there was a paranormal investigator just across the street from our house, on the same side as my son's bedroom. I went and asked what it was about, and apparently our neighbor experienced a ghost walking through his backyard for a few nights. It was coming from the river next to his house. So that's about it. My son hasn't changed his story yet. What I'm more so wondering, since people here seem interested in the subject, is if any of this sounds familiar. Maybe he saw some movie trailer or something. I'm pretty skeptical of all this, but I'm willing to hear any thoughts and maybe ways to ward this off. I was in my early 20s and lived alone in an apartment complex in a rougher part of Houston, Texas. It sat alongside an elementary school, which helped, but it still wasn't an area that I would go walking around in at night. It was a leaky apartment, and I do have a mold allergy, something that I have not ruled out. I also have a history of extremely morbid nightmares and night terrors, paired with an overactive and obsessive imagination. However, this was before those became routine issues for me. I did not partake in drugs of any kind, including alcohol, during this time. But I can remember when the nightmares started. It was the same one over and over again. It was always in the first-person view, like from my own eyes, so I didn't know what I looked like. I also wasn't in control, because it played out like a movie. But I was in an empty apartment and jumped by a dark figure, stabbed multiple times. I distinctly remember staring down at bloody blue jeans and worn white tennis shoes as I'm being dragged, leaving a blood trail on the beige carpet, as well as the strange squishing noise the knife made while it went in and out erratically, almost pulling bits of flesh out of my chest with each stab. I was tied up and wrapped up, and eventually propped against a wall. Once the dark figure turned off the light and shut the door, I woke up. Every single time. I have a specific way of dreaming, or even dreamscape, and this was not it. I would wake up deeply disturbed and unable to fall back to sleep. Once I was able to fall asleep, I would have it once or twice more. I figured it was stress, having just started a new job, and also having just ended a toxic relationship that was causing some residual drama in my life. About 4 or 5 days in, the nightmares were still occurring. They were getting worse in the sense that I would wake up holding my chest, almost able to feel the stabbing in my dream. It was at this point that I started to feel a dark presence in the room with me, to the point of being too afraid to get up and turn on my light or leave the room at all. Like I was being watched. This is the point at which I started talking to my friends about it. It was affecting my sleep, and I was showing up to work extremely tired. I vocalized my bizarre experience to people close around me, and even to my new management. Around the 6th or 7th day, I was feeling a dark presence constantly in the apartment, even in the daytime. I had also moved into the living room and started sleeping on my futon, since I had started waking up from those nightmares and seeing a dark form against my bedroom wall. About 6 foot tall, no features, just black, and hearing a masculine "get me out" somewhere in between sleep and waking. It was also by this time that there was a smell growing in my apartment. It was faint and hard to describe, like a pile of rotting fish mixed in with dog shit and the nasty sweetness of old fruit. But it was faint. I thought it was mold or the common sewer problems in the area, or a bad tenant. Samson was a kitten at the time and would often appear spooked, all puffed up, hissing or running out of the bedroom. I thought it was normal kitten behavior, like he was practicing his little lion skills. I didn't even think it was strange how he would sleep against my chin under the covers with me. This still may have been the case, but his behavior was unusual. The people close around me encouraged me to seek professional help at this point. I wasn't sleeping and experiencing fluctuations in my mood and performance. I was also feeling depressed. I would jokingly call what I was going through as a morbid quarter-life crisis, before finally agreeing to talk to a professional about it. The first and only place I went to was my general doctor. He concluded that I was experiencing generalized anxiety and under tremendous stress. No shit. I was provided with some resources and referrals for therapy, for a more thorough assessment, and followed my appointment with a 10-hour shift at work. When I got home from work, there were emergency lights all over my parking lot. I noticed caution tape along the stairway on the opposite side of my apartment. I had to maneuver around a news station van to get up the stairs. I caught words like murder and unidentified victim before retreating inside. Since most of the activity was on the other side of my building, I sat outside on my balcony to watch and listen, but didn't gather much. I slept well that night. No night terrors, no nightmares. Surprising, since I was experiencing anxiety over what I had gathered the night before. But I was also exhausted, and maybe meeting with a professional had eased my mind. I woke up to a phone call from a close friend who I had texted the night before. She was familiar with the troubles I had been having, and was freaking out with details she had gathered about the incident. An unidentifiable male, suspected illegal drug trafficker, that had taken residency in the apartment per the news, was found stabbed to death in an apartment closet, tied up and wrapped in trash bags, lower jaw removed. The body was found after the tenants living directly below reported a strong, foul odor and fluid leaking through their ceiling, which was actually blood. As for the closet the body was found in, it shares the same wall as my bedroom that I was seeing the dark form on. For the sake of time, I'll just say that everything immediately returned to normal. I was sleeping again, and the feeling around the apartment was much lighter. Due to tenant laws and such, I was allowed out of my lease early due to the recent events. It was an offer I took without question, promptly moving to a slightly less crappy apartment a few miles away. I've tried to explain this logically to myself for years, only sharing it with a few people. For a long time, I figured that it was some sort of chemical reaction, some primal trigger, the smell of a decomposing body causing something to fire off in my brain that there was danger. But the specifics of my nightmares, the dark form against my wall at night, and the overall sense of someone watching me, are things I still can't explain. My mother's aunt, let's call her Maria, used to have a beautiful garden. She took good care of it, and her husband had a good-paying job, so she didn't have to work. A lot of women envied her beautiful home and loyal husband. My mother said that their envy grew into hate. Apparently, there were many local women whom many called witches. They would read palms, give psychic readings, and even curse someone if you paid them enough. Well, one day, Maria woke up, and she noticed her eyes wouldn't focus. As much as she rubbed them, she was barely able to see. As the days went on, it grew worse. After about a week, she went to see an optometrist who couldn't find anything physically wrong with her eyes. She was prescribed eye drops and sent home. The days went by, and it got so much worse, to the point that she needed help doing very basic things. She was losing her eyesight. Then, she began to experience excruciating pain in her legs randomly. She took painkillers, and then desperately went to see her doctor. They couldn't find anything wrong with her. Her hair started falling out, and she began to lose her ability to walk. Maria had a friend named Vero, who came to see her one day, as her close friends and family were aware of her situation, and figured she would die soon. Everything was shutting down, and the doctors couldn't find anything. Vero wasn't a witch, but was very sensitive to people. When she visited my aunt, she told her that she sensed a dark energy within her. My aunt was very skeptical of this, and asked Vero not to try to convince her of witchcraft. Vero went on to tell my aunt that someone had done this to her, which is why doctors can't find anything. As a final attempt, my aunt asked her what she should do. Vero told her to go see the witch and ask her to reveal what curse was placed upon her. Still skeptical, my aunt did as she said. What did she have to lose? She went to the other side of town, and sure enough, the witch was more than willing to tell her anything for a few pesos. She went on to tell my aunt that someone wants her dead, and has placed a cursed object near her home. My aunt couldn't believe her ears. The witch told her that someone who envied her probably did this, and in order to stop it, she would have to find that object. My aunt raced home and turned her house upside down, looking for anything abnormal or bizarre. With the help of her husband, they found a frog that was thrown in one of her pots outside in her garden. It was still alive, barely. Her discovery made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. The frog had its legs tied to each other and was blindfolded. The frog had been kicking and trying to break free, but couldn't. It wasn't completely buried in dirt, but the attempt was apparent. My aunt freed the frog, and it hopped away. She didn't feel better instantly, so she thought it wasn't related to her. Except the next morning when she woke up, she was able to see and walk. I'm a healthcare professional working at a small hospital in a rural area of the Midwest in the USA. It's not unusual for me to see 6 to 8 patients daily. Occasionally, you run into a patient who you really hit it off with, where it seems as if you've known each other for years. That is how my story starts. At my hospital, we have what's called a joint program for patients who are having elective hip or knee replacements done. I was scheduled to see this lady, who we can just call Doris, for the last time before she discharged home later that same date. As I've said, Doris and I really hit it off. In the process of helping her prepare to head home, I asked her what made her finally decide to get her knee replacement done. She explained that she had been to her doctor many times for knee pain, and finally decided to follow his suggestion after they found what she described as little beads around her knees in the x-rays, likely bone or cartilage. I teased her by suggesting that, the aliens probably put them in there. Doris did not miss a beat. She told me that she wanted to show me something, and asked me to grab her iPad for her. After doing so, she pulls up pictures of some of her cattle that had been mutilated, in the way you usually see on the alien TV shows, documentaries, and so on. I'm talking patches of skin taken out in perfect circles around the eyes, missing tongue, desiccated insides with perfect hide, missing rectum or udders, no blood, all of that. I was honestly too shocked to speak much at first. I asked Doris who or what she thought was doing it. She stated that she had absolutely no idea, but that she was sure it wasn't the government, because they could easily come to any of the cattle auctions and buy cattle, and no one would know. She said she thought it was an intimidation tactic to leave the cattle behind like that, to be found the next day. She also said that it seems they rotate around the cattle ranches in the area every year or so. Her ranch will go for a few years unmolested, while her neighbors will have problems. Also, she stated that it always seems to occur on what she called those weird holidays, by which I'm guessing she meant equinoxes, solstices, and so on. She said that sometimes her husband will hear a loud whooshing wind sound above his head outside as well. Anyway, that's pretty much it. This happened about 2 years ago now, and it's been in my mind ever since. It's creepy to think that this kind of thing is happening within a half hour of where I lay down to sleep every night. This happened about 5 years ago. I was working at a translation company based here in Tegucigalpa, Honduras. It was a 7-story building. That day I went for lunch break and grabbed my phone. It was an old phone with no smartphone tech, just calls and text. I finished lunch and took the elevator to the 7th floor. Inside I got a phone call, and I looked at the screen. I see this weird phone number with like 20 or more digits. I decided to answer. There was a lot of static and white noise on the line, but it was a woman, and I understood everything that she said. So this is how the call went. Keep in mind, this was all in Spanish. Hello? Hello, who's this?
Isaac. Isaac. Isaac.
Yes? Who's calling?
Isaac. The angel is going to die.
Who? Who's going to die?
Isaac. The angel. She's going to die.
The call ended here. There was a lot of static and it dropped. It freaked me out a lot because my niece's nickname was Angelita, which means little angel. She was born with Down syndrome and a really bad heart condition that made life for her so hard during the 2 years she was with us. That day she was scheduled for heart surgery at the main hospital here. We made a GoFundMe campaign for her, and lots of people helped, specifically from the US. That night she went to surgery and it was all okay. Doctors were taking care of her. The next day is when she had complications and was moved to the ICU. The whole family was at home when we got the terrible news that her heart had stopped, and she was gone. Our whole world crumbled, and I was struck with depression for about a year. To this day, I have no idea who called me. Let me start by saying that we had a good and loving mother. She put us before anything and anyone. She sometimes worked 2 jobs to support the 6 of us. She did the best she could with what she had, and what she was capable of at that time. I also know she had a personal passion for spiritual growth, the metaphysical and occult sciences. I think she was addicted to the sensation of the phenomenon. I think in some ways it opened the doors to the other side. It just became a part of our lives, and we happily were along for her journey. When I was 5 years old, my big toe was cut off in some bicycle spokes. My siblings were told not to put me on the back of the bike without my shoes on. I guess my sister didn't get the memo. I was the youngest of 6, 4 sisters and 1 brother. I slept with my sister closest to my age, but after the accident, I couldn't be in the bed with her because I had to sleep with this thing that helped my foot stay in place, and she might have moved in her sleep and hurt me. My mother made a cozy pad with blankets and pillows next to the couch, where I could safely sleep in the living room. At that time, we lived in a townhouse apartment in Hollywood, California. It had a big living room with very high ceilings. To the left was a wide-arched doorway that leads to the dining room and the kitchen. Across the length of the archway were rolls of film strips my mother got from her job, and they streamed down the doorway like beads. Straight ahead was the staircase, and under the stairs, in a cubbyhole, was my mom's desk. To the right were a long leather couch and my bed pad. Running up the wall to the ceiling behind the couch were huge psychedelic Zodiac posters. People thought our place was groovy, the late 60s. We all saw little things here and there. Nothing really scary, just odd. A couple of times we heard running down the stairs while we were sitting on the couch, or creaking in the hall. My sister and I saw someone who looked like our grandmother standing in our bedroom doorway for a long, long time, just staring at us. It was too dark to see her face. My mom told me that I talked about seeing angels, and how I said that I picked her before I was born because she was what I needed for my life. I might remember bits and pieces, but that has all pretty much faded away. But this did not. My eldest sister and I were watching The Late Show in the living room, her on the couch and me on my pad. Everyone else was in bed. I must have fallen asleep, so she turned off the TV and covered me up, then went upstairs to bed herself. After a while, I woke up. It was so quiet. The moonlight coming through the kitchen window was shining on the film strips hanging from the dining room archway, and reflected small color images on the floor. Because of this thing holding my foot still, I couldn't move. As I was laying there with my head on my arm, my eyelids were getting so heavy. I had my arm stretched out across the floor, looking at the pretty colors from the film dance on my little fingers, when I noticed a change. The color reflections were moving. I looked up to the archway, and the strips of film were moving as if a breeze was hitting them. I laid my head back down and watched them start to sway back and forth. Then they started swaying in sync with each other. I didn't know to be scared. I was so young. They kept swaying. Then all of a sudden they stopped. Just like that. All of them at the same time just stopped. I was very curious. I propped myself on my elbows, still laying on my back, and tilted my head. I saw a figure behind the film casting a shadow next to me. The film strips started to separate as if someone was walking through them. It was an almost human form, but it was gray with no distinctive face. It had a male's energy. I could see him as he stepped closer. I looked down and noticed that he had no feet. I looked back up at him, but instead of him across from me, now he was crouching down 2 feet from my pad on the floor in front of me. I remember wondering why he had no light coming from him. I wasn't scared at that point, I just didn't understand. He got even closer and leaned over my head. I innocently looked up at him. He was less than 2 inches from my face. I could feel his cold breath on my nose, drying my eyes to the point that tears started rolling down my cheeks. And for the very first time, I felt real fear. I attempted to call for my mother, but nothing came out. My heart was beating so hard and fast I could hear it. I tried to scoot my body back, but the thing holding my foot wouldn't let me. He was leaning his whole form over my little body. I began to sweat when he started making an inhuman noise. It started out sounding like radio static, a low chuckle into a high-frequency long screech, then a pain piercing into my big toe. It felt like a long, burning needle going into the bone. I wet the bed with fright, and I heard a loud ringing in my ears. Everything started to echo and spin. I remember seeing the room flip upside down as it all turned white, and I passed out. I woke up to my mother cradling me and calling out, "Baby, are you all right?" I guess she had a feeling, so she ran downstairs. She said that something told her to check on me. She never told me if she saw anything. There was blood coming out of my toe. The doctor said I must have ripped out the stitches in my sleep, even though I know I didn't move. My sister just recently told me that after that happened, our mother had the apartment blessed, and that's why I never saw that thing anymore. All I know is that she never let me sleep alone in the living room again. In fact, until my toe healed, I slept with my mother from that point, and she held my foot all night. Thank you for reading. Hey guys and ladies, thanks for watching. Send your story or creepypasta to the email in the description. My merch, Patreon, Instagram, Twitter, and Discord are down there too. I'm considering putting out content a few days early for patrons, ad-free. So let me know if you'd be interested in that. Well, Ripley, we've done another one. And she's ignoring me. So, anyway, be good to animals, even people. So.
Scout, Snema, Barksbus, Herish.
All right, people, thank you for attending the annual Doctor's Appreciation get-together of 2020. But before we go, let me go down my list here of honorable mentions. All right, so we got Dr. Phil. I see you over there. You could spot that head a mile away. Okay, Dr. Dre, Doc Martin, Dr. Seuss, Dr. Pepper. Love your drink, buddy. Dr. Scholes, who always smells like corn nuts, I'm told. All right, so what else we got? Dr. J, Dr. Kevorkian. Is he here? He's probably still in the parking lot. Dr. Doolittle, appreciate you. Dr. Dre, did I already say that? Okay, so I think that pretty much wraps it up. Oh, Doc Emmett Brown. Dr. Jekyll. I hope you didn't bring your friend. Dr. Evil, Dr. Disrespect. Dr. Frankenstein. Great guy. I want to give a side shout out to Nurse Ratched. I've hated you for fucking years. Doctor Who. Dr. Strangelove. Doc Ock. Dr. Bashir, Dr. Crusher, Dr. Feelgood. All right, so I think that wraps it up. Thank you for attending the Doctor Appreciation Get Together of 2020. Is that what I called it before? All right, well, good night, everybody.